That's what I'm talking about. Welcome, everybody. Man, do I love that theme song. No, I do not want to hear yet another Quiet Place trailer. Thank you, YouTube. What's going on, everybody? Welcome, Arvanauts. Welcome to a Friday night stream. It is 9:29 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it is episode 23, almost 2 full years worth of Masters of the Dungeon. Actually, it has been over 2 years, but we have had a couple of episodes where a couple of months where we did not broadcast for various reasons. But we are here and we are ready to go, and I'm super excited about it. So it's going to be good times. Yeah. And yes, people made it from the beginning. Yeah, the Prime intro video, but I can't do that. I can only do that echo for general stuff. I can only do that for general videos. So you'll see it tomorrow and it'll get plenty of use. Believe me. I love that one too. But welcome everybody. And I am super excited. Good to see you, Lone Wolf. Good to see everyone who is here for episode 23 of Masters of the Dungeon, our D&D roundtable. Before I get any further, let me remind people about ways to support the stream. If you haven't done so already, please follow the channel. That is one of the best ways to support us here. Please check out the YouTube that I mentioned before with !ArvTube. The Discord, which I noticed that we have a new person who just joined us, who is familiar to some people here who know something about Icarus, and that is, of course, !ArvCord for my Discord channel. !Arv tweets is my Twitter, and please go over there and retweet this stream. Thank you to those of you who've done that already. We always like to do that to kind of broaden things out beyond just the Twitch community. Let me also remind everybody, if you haven't done so already, please, not only you, but everybody else, let people know that Twitch does this thing where they periodically turn off notifications and don't send notifications to people anymore if they, quote, haven't been to a channel in a while. Nobody that I know likes this. We all wish Twitch didn't do it, but they don't. So whatever. But please tell people, make sure that it actually is on, that not just that you're following, but that you get a notification when we go live here, because that's always a good thing. And then, of course, you can always find all of this on arvaneleron.com. And yeah, that's awesome, Garlic Tofu. I'm a big fan of Discord. Big fan. Actually, yesterday I discovered that Discord will not only now share screens of a particular game, but it will also share audio, which is going to be a game changer for the Arvocalists in particular, who will now be able to hear the music instead of just looking at the video. So that's going to be nice. But anyway, so yes, you can find out all of this on my website, arvaneleron.com. On the financial side, !ArvShop is the thing that will allow you to get the merchandise from me that is related to my channel. Right now we have Infinity and Beyond stuff. They, of course, are playing Curse of Strahd. Adventures of Middle-earth, the Terry Toon illustrated shirts and hats and all that kind of good stuff. But we also will be having some Esper Genesis stuff going up there soon as well in the new year, which is exciting. And so that goes directly to support the channel, so please consider supporting us and also getting cool clothing for you. And also, of course, we have the... Oh, thank you, Coven Guy. Oh, is this the... Didn't you already pledge? Oh, this is because of the... Okay, right. So the number is... Oh, there it is. Okay, thank you, man. Okay, it's fixed. Yeah. Okay, because I was going to say, and I am, again, grateful that you did that. Thanks, man. And I wanted to know because I was, like, there were all these issues with, like, January, New Year, like, pledges and all this stuff, so it was bizarre. But thank you, man. I appreciate it very, very much. And, yeah. And, again, double check to make sure, because I don't know whether you got anything from me before for that $10 pledge, so just double check with me. I think I sent you a message about it, but just make sure. Anyway, so, again, on the financial side, the Discord, shop, the Patreon, which Coven Guy was nice enough to just subscribe to, !ArvTreon. That is the Patreon, which is really the financial backbone of the channel, really does make a difference. So if we can push that up even further, that will make even more of a dent in things and will help a lot with things like paying for that intro video that you saw and all that stuff, the new one that Echo made reference to before. And last but certainly not least, that sub button. We are currently sitting at, I believe, about 102, 103 subscribers, something like that, which is awesome. And so please consider jumping on board and subscribing there to get those awesome sub badges and everything else. I have not yet updated the inspirations, but I will definitely update your ability to inspire people by the time we have tabletop stuff starting to go live, which will be happening next week. Today we have got Masters of the Dungeon, and then when it is done, I'll be playing some Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order later on. Tomorrow we have got some Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD on the docket, as I am moving into the home stretch of that game. So if you've been enjoying watching that, I know that Garlic Tofu happens to be a big fan of the Zelda game. That is happening tomorrow. It'll be starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, and usually I stream for a little longer on Saturday. Normally I go like from 7 to like 12:30 or so we'll get a good long stream in for that. And then we may have some bonus streams over the next couple of weeks, so that'll be happening as well. Yes, tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. What's up, Rhiannon? So yes. So that'll be happening, and I'm excited for that. It's going to be good times. But tonight we have got Masters of the Dungeon, and I was talking to this wonderful person just before we got started, and we have got a big show planned for you, and I hope a big year on this show planned for you as well. And in case you're wondering who I'm talking about, I give you this person who is here, and that, of course, is Little Red Dot, who is back with us. So, Dot, Happy New Year. Welcome to another year of Masters of the Dungeon and Twitch shenanigans in general.
Yes, right? Here we go again. Here we go again.
One more time.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me back. It was a good holiday. My dad got engaged.
Yeah, congratulations to your dad.
Yeah. You know what? At this point in their life, I just want them to be happy. Lord, be happy. So yeah, no, it's good. So yeah, I'm gonna go home and saw family. I got stranded in South Georgia,
Really?
in my podunk town. So, because global warming is not a thing, it's been raining a lot.
Sure.
Normally so, I guess you could say, in the Southeast. And so it's ruined a bunch of crops. But I grew up in a place where there aren't even paved roads. So our roads, like the road I grew up on is just Georgia clay. And so the weather, it poured for like 3 days at Christmas and it washed our roads out. And my poor little city car could not get home. So I was stranded in Blackshear for 3 days, or 2 days really, until the roads solidified enough where the city could come rake them and I could get to a highway.
That feels like the most rural Georgia of rural Georgia stories that exist.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
my car. Yeah. So, anyways, so we'll say it was eventful. The holidays were eventful.
Now, have you since then gone out and gotten your ATV to avoid this problem from occurring again in the future?
Well, here's the thing. I used to drive one when I lived there.
Yeah.
But like I only go like once or twice a year. So it's not valued enough. My poor gas mileage in the city though. That's the real killer.
Yeah. That would not actually work too well with an ATV riding down downtown Atlanta. Yeah. Not so much. Oh my God.
Well, awesome. Well, how were your holidays, Ar?
They were thank you. They were very nice. It was fun really to actually get a chance to have a little bit of a break because I've been pretty much, candle on both ends for a long time, for months and months and months and months and months. And so it was good to actually dial it back a little bit. I got two things, one of which is not tabletop related, but I'll talk about tonight, that is a board game that I got that was really, really cool, and that was a lot of fun. And
you know what? I'll talk about a board game too. Let's have a special section tonight. It's not even a board game technically. It's just a game. It's a party game, and I have to talk about it because it's brilliant.
Oh, sweet! I'm up for it. I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, that was a good time. And then the kids got the stuff that they wanted. Like the one thing that I need to share, which I've already talked about elsewhere, but so I got my daughter, little Arv, who is going to be 12 in about 3 weeks, which is troubling. But anyway, just because oh my God, where does the time go? Anyway, but I got her at her request. We just finished reading The Hobbit. We've started reading Harry Potter, and then I'm going to read A Lord of the Rings. And so anyway, she just finished reading The Hobbit for like the third time. And this time she was reading the edition that they have where they have all of Tolkien's illustrations. So they get to Lake Town. And she's like, at one point, this is a couple months ago, she's like, Dad, she's like, I really love that picture. It's such a great picture. Could I get that on a sweater? And I'm like, sure. And then, of course, I didn't bring it up again, but I obviously was going to go do that. So I got her this awesome looking hoodie with the picture of the Lake Town Tolkien illustration. I'm like, this is so my kid. Like, if there was any question, this is my child.
I just branded her.
This is my yeah. It was. Oh my God, it was the best.
Oh, that's cute.
She's like, I can't wait to go into school and be like, look, what is this Lake Town? And I'm like, I have an image that like every one of those kids is gonna be like, what? And like from somewhere in the distance, he'll be like, yeah, just like shouting it out. I was, oh man, I love her so much. She's such an incredible kid. Anyway, so it was great. It was a great Christmas for the kids too, because they really had a lot of fun, and she got to play Santa for a little brother who, was kind of marveling at all of it. And, so yeah, it was nice. And it was nice to feel like, just to have a little, before what looks to be a very busy 2020.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, so it was good, and I am glad that we are back here doing this because I really enjoy having the chance to chat with you, hang out with you, and to chat about tabletop stuff. And so, accordingly, we're going to do this slightly differently today for those who are familiar. Normally, what we do is we talk about something exciting that happened in one of our campaigns, and then we talk about kind of the main topic, which is whatever we come up with, and then we usually talk a little bit about product review, about something that happened that, some cool thing that we just gotten or that we saw that we want to get or something to talk about. And then we do an Ask Me Anything. Now, we will still do the Ask Me Anything at the end like usual, and we'll sort of do the product review because we're going to be talking about, as you just heard, board games, party games, and also a couple of tabletop games that Dot and I are both
Sorry, we're getting a little, it's 2020,
about.
Baby. We're turning it up a notch.
We're taking this knob to 11. So we're going to do that. But we also wanted to talk a little bit about, since this is very early 2020, to talk a little bit about kind of year in review on the tabletop gaming side and the year to come. And so I will start out by asking Dot. I want to ask this in two ways. I want to ask, first of all, in 2019, what were the sort of... what do you think were the biggest highlights for you in terms of games that you played? It doesn't have to have been games that came out in 2019, but game that you first perhaps, had access to, or that you really for the first time played a lot of in 2019, something like that. And then the other thing I want to ask you in 2019, which is tied into that, is what was the sort of trend, either good, bad, or indifferent, that sort of stood out to you the most about tabletop gaming in general in 2019? Like the rise of indie, even to a greater degree, or more narrative games, or like what is it? So
Okay. So I have to say, I think the game that was most impactful for me, I actually played Scum and Villainy. And I really loved it. Like, I ran a campaign on my channel, and I really thought that it was going to be a 4-part campaign, like 4 mini session. And we loved it so much, we ran a 5th session with that campaign, and then couldn't get enough of it and ran a full season. And then we ran another 8. So like, it just maybe it was the crew I was doing it with, but like, I just really love it. I love the way the game is set up. I love the mechanisms, the downtime piece, which I think is really cool for character development. Like, all of it is just neat, and it feels like a rogue space game. It feels like a proper Scum and Villainy game, and it's funny because I'm going to talk about a different sci-fi game later that feels very different. So just know that I really, really love Scum and Villainy. But in terms of trend, actually, I'm going to talk about another favorite game. I did play a lot of it, but it's actually For the Queen. I've mentioned it a few times, right? It's a card-based game. We got a lot of those. We got a lot, I felt like, in 2019 of question-based RPGs. Whether it was, I actually saw a couple that's a single person, which is kind of cool, like a single person where you like a question's asking you write a letter to yourself, and then you like fold it up and you kind of play this game with yourself. But then, things like For the Queen, which have, or maybe this is GM-less games. We also saw a lot of GM-less games being created, which I think is a really important shift that we're seeing, that the GM is important and it needs to be there for certain things, but that storytelling can exist outside of somebody that's facilitating.
Agree.
Which is kind of cool. And For the Queen, all of those things, it's question based and it's a GM-less based game. Like, I think people really want to start making RPGs, and we've seen it now that popularity is happening, that anybody can step into. That's not inundated with a lot of information. You don't have to read a chart or a table. That role playing can be as simple as answering questions and building a world together. Thank you.
Right. Which sort of increased a lot. Yeah, absolutely. And increases access, which is something I was going to talk about in mind. Because access, I think, was it's been a thing that's been discussed before, but I think last year was the year that you began to see the maturing of how we actually do that. And part of it, I think, is just the addition of more games and more game concepts and ideas into the market, so that there's a general sense of getting more in there. It's one of the reasons that a lot of people talk about the idea the way to defeat hate speech is more speech. And I think there is something to be said for that. Hate speech also needs to be stopped by the removal of it from areas where it does not belong. But the other way to deal with hate speech, sort of writ broadly, is more better speech. And so one of the ways you do that is by increasing the sort of options for games that exist. Quite apart from the doubt, the sort of fear about are you diffusing the market, you
Yeah.
actually do the exact opposite. You
Correct.
increase the interest that people have in the market, and
Yep.
you force the sort of big granddaddies in the room, specifically places like D&D or Pathfinder, games that have been around for a long
Hmm.
time. You force them to push them into diversifying. And I was thinking about this. I'm going to be talking later on about Eberron, and I was thinking also about Curse of Strahd that you and I both play,
Hmm.
and how, to me, now, yes, Curse of Strahd originally is drawn from Ravenloft, but I'm sorry, the development and the level of detail in which Curse of Strahd has gone into is, to me, a direct response to being pushed. In fact, you could argue 5e is a direct response to being pushed by other narrative systems that are
Hmm.
dominated by narratives and which
Yes.
seem somewhat more accessible. And I think D&D, in a good way, sort of responded to that. So
Agreed.
it helps everybody, basically, is the idea to sort of bring more people in. I also want to co-sign on that Scum and Villainy, because I've had a chance not only to play it myself, but I also have had a joint Twitch Speculate session on several occasions on this channel in which Mike Underwood ran Scum and Villainy, which was Star Wars themed,
Hmm.
for a group of players. And yeah, I mean, it really does handle that heist kind
Yep.
of quote criminal element
Yep.
aspect
The first time I
really
played it, we
well.
played it was a one shot, and it was a Star Wars setting. We played it. We played a Star Wars setting, which was perfect. Now, I will say I had played it a couple times since then in like a one off style. When I ran it on my campaign, I did write my own universe. Like I wrote my
No,
own
I remember you telling me about that.
system.
Yeah.
Well, I say system, it's not the right way. Solar system. That's the word I'm looking for. I wrote my own solar system, but that's just because I wanted to be able to control the politics under like the story I wanted to tell.
Yeah, yeah,
But in terms of mechanisms and every gear and everything else, it was completely Scum and Villainy
yeah. Which,
whole way.
and by the way, I think that's the other thing. I wasn't going to talk about this necessarily about the trend, but I should mention I do notice a lot more kind of modularity where you can, because I mean we were talking about this even off stream just before we got started. How many things do we have where you can literally take a significant amount of a given system, but then remove the parts that you don't want, even if it's not explicitly said that that's the case.
Right.
So you can you can bolt on things that you
Hmm.
prefer, and you can remove things that you don't prefer. And people could, well, you could always do that. Well, yeah, I mean, look, you can always do anything with any system, but the
Right.
question is, how much does the system like encourage you, enable you to do these things, and how much does
Mm,
it fight you? You could theoretically run a very role-playing driven and very, narrative-based 4E D&D campaign, and I know people, including our former co-host Dave Digital DM, who would swear that this was what 4E was all about. With respect to Dave, I'm sorry, I've run that system, and no, 4E is not well suited for that, and so yeah, of course I could make adjustments, and that means that I could have written the system myself if I wanted to. The question is, does it
right.
enhance and enable and it make more accessible again this process? So I think it's nice to see these systems that allow you to do more, I guess, customizing,
Yes.
within the system itself. So I mean, the ones that I'll bring up very quickly, as far as the games that are concerned, I continue to come back to this game that I mentioned, I think at the beginning of last year, which is The Clay That Woke, which is Paul Zega's
Yes. You keep
system.
talking about that.
And it's a system which we're still working on actually getting to play, because it's kind of a complicated system, but it feels like it's a system which has had a profound effect on me, not even having
Hmm.
played it yet, because of what I think it's saying about what games can do.
Mm,
And that game has really stuck with me as something that I'm almost sort of continually looking back to in terms of the questions that I like to ask in the adventures that I play. And adventures are different, and they ask different questions, and they have different tones, but still there are different things that I like to be able to explore in game
right.
adventuring now. And I like the idea that this was an example of a fully realized vision in how to ask several of those questions in an interesting and coherent way. And of course we had, as you know, because you were with me when we did it, we interviewed Paul Zagon here, and it was really interesting to hear him talking a little bit
Hmm.
about what created this idea for him,
Yep.
the genesis of the system for him. So I was a big fan of that, and it really kind of stuck with me. As far as the trend that I want to mention, I want to go back to that GM list thing you mentioned. And I talked a little bit about this already, but just I think there has been a growing democratization of TTRPGs. And by that I mean, I think that gatekeeping is on the run. I
Yes.
was on Twitter yesterday, and I happened to see something pop up about a guy who said, "This is Star Wars, but I'm going to tie it back to gaming in a second." He said, "You're not a real Star Wars fan unless you have," and then he does literally bullet point list: read the extended universe, read the following comics, read the stuff. So he does that, and the first person who responds, which is the person that I saw, Chuck Wendig, was like, the way that you know you're a Star Wars fan is that you like something ever done by Star Wars. That's it. There's no other
That's how you
key.
know.
That's
Yes,
how you
correct.
know. That's
Yeah.
it. Get that gatekeeping garbage out of here. And Chuck Wendig, of course, wrote a series called the Aftermath Trilogy. He ought to know. I mean, he was the first
Right.
person to introduce people to the new Disney Star Wars, for good or for ill. People know what that's about coming from him. And then just the flood of people afterwards who are basically like, yeah, get that gatekeeping out of there. Now, that guy did not really learn. He sort of doubled down. He's like, I guess I touched a nerve. I'm like, I guess you don't realize what you're doing. But the
Right.
point is,
Do you hear yourself?
you don't realize what's going on. But that gatekeeping is something which I think I don't know if you agree, but I think even maybe 10, 15 years ago, I think some people might have like maybe rolled their eyes, but they probably wouldn't have called it out, and they probably would have been
Right.
like, oh, that guy. Whereas now I think people are very comfortable being like, no, D&D is, in this particular thing, this was Star Wars, but
Right.
anything, tabletop included, you do not need to have played every edition since 19 whatever. Like I've been DMing now for over 30 years. I've been playing this for literally close to 40 years. I am not a gatekeeper for D&D because that's nonsense. I'm not a gatekeeper for tabletop role playing. That's nonsense. No one should be a gatekeeper for it. The only question should be, would you like to get together with friends and tell wonderful stories and explore things that matter to you? That's it.
Correct.
If you want to do that, then you're happy to do that. And how you tell those stories and all that is completely up to you. But I think that things like the incredible success of Critical Role, which we've talked about in here before, but I mean even stepping up a notch in 2019, the Kickstarter with the huge, overwhelming, like whatever it was, $10 million that they made from that.
More than that. It
was more than that, right? It was like it was
Right,
running at
yeah.
the same time as my Forbidden Library one shot, so I ought to know. They came over and like they were, again, that sort of thing, and a lot of the games that we were talking about on here, a lot of the games that we discussed, the rise of different Twitch channels playing a lot of different indie games, and I would include you in that, and Eric Vulgaris and Mike from Unmade Gaming and Video Store Cowboy, who's on my channel, and Encounter Roleplay, and all these people, Hyper
Yep.
RPG, all of these people at these channels have led to this point where I think people feel like they can also feel like tabletop belongs to them also, which is a hugely positive trend, right? Because it means that it's not, let me go check with the 15 years ago straight white guy to ask him what he thinks
Right.
about is okay for, role playing. But now it's about, can I ask all these people what sorts of games would they all like to play, so that you can have all of these people now who want to play these games, which just increases the pool of players and leads to more awesome. Like, just more
Yep.
role playing is just better. So that's a trend
Yeah.
that I really am pleased about, that I know.
It's interesting. It's when I shifted from doing theater to streaming and telling stories with all of you instead. One of the things I said is I really wanted more autonomy over the art I was making.
Mhm.
That, I think as a theater artist, and I've said this before, you're told where to stand and how to say the thing, and here is your line, and it's written by somebody else. And
Right.
I think that there's a trend in tabletop in regards to this that is very similar, right? Like a painter doesn't have to ask permission what color paint to use to make the thing.
Right.
They don't. They
Right.
use it.
Right.
And so asking permission is no longer part of the tabletop process. I
Right.
don't have to ask permission to play. There's enough out there, and accessibility is becoming even more where I don't need permission. I can just do it.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty beautiful thing, right? Like that's full on creative, like, I don't know, freedom to be able to go and do and make. And also I would say this is something, I had this conversation with somebody over at Rimley Farr, a writer and a friend that I quite admire in the tabletop community. But he, we got to chatting about the way that so much of the content is open, like source, right? Or it's open, like, for example, I took Scum and Villainy and ran a campaign on Twitch in which I was able to pay my players and do a thing, and we could tell a story and use what we wanted from somebody else's content and add my own content. It is what most of the art world hasn't really figured out yet. Like, how do we share our art in a way that is mutually beneficial for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
And tabletop has kind of that. It's a unique thing to be able to say, hey, look, I'm playing this game on this platform using part of my content, part of your content, and the creative energies
Yes.
of incredible role players and storytellers. And
Yes.
you get this hodgepodge of just creative freedom in that,
Yes.
without having to worry about what that belongs to me or I own that.
Well,
Um,
I think it's 100% right, and I would even add to that that I think also what it does is creativity. And anyone who's ever done, Dot has done this in acting and other fields, and I've done this in writing and music too. That creativity is not a limiting thing where you run out of it. It is not
Correct.
the case. Creativity, in fact, thrives when more people contribute to it and become a part of it. And so that's the other thing, is that the more that this comes around, the more ideas that you get yourself. Like, I mean, seriously, I get the opportunity to sit with a bunch of players and with a bunch of people who are enormously talented, creative, gifted people. Also, I'm going to come back to this in a minute, being slightly sentimental, good people. And I get to see those people operate together to create a creative narrative, which is fascinating to me, and some of which, in fact, much of which I could not have predicted. So to use the Curse of Strahd example, I mean, I come out of those things, some often emotionally drained, but I mean, I come out of those things feeling incredibly blessed to have the opportunity to work with these people who are so good at being able to kind of build these stories collaboratively in a way that will hopefully inspire others to do these things and sort of, like work out problems and issues that people are talking about and things like that, and things that I can then look at and go, these are themes that I'd like to look at in some of my own work, or ideas that I'd like to look at in some of my own work that I can bring back later on. So that's, I mean, extraordinary, that we have the opportunity to do that. And that's something which I think tabletop uniquely sort of brings to it. And that honestly, I mean, a lot of people are like, well, tabletop has never changed. It's still I mean, yeah, people still can sit down and go back and do cool dungeon crawls, but absolutely, tabletop is not the same thing that it was when I was playing literally in my friend's basement with a bunch
Right.
of Oreos, and we're running around doing Palace of the Silver Princess. And I mean, we were not thinking about broad scale stories and developing characters over long periods of time. That has become a bigger thing, but that's all to the good, because
Yeah.
it's not forced on people. People are like, oh God, I have to tell a story. They like telling stories. And so, you're 100%
I feel like I've
right
said it
about
on this channel before. We've been telling stories since the dawning of mankind.
Yeah,
Around fires together, stories unite us. So do games. We've been playing games and telling stories together as a species from the moment we could stand up straight, folk. Like, it's just embedded in who, like, our genome. It's there.
Absolutely.
And we love to tell stories. We all do. And even if we don't tell them, we still like to consume them. We learn by them.
Right.
Stories and those kind of things, we love it. We do. And they can't be denied. The difference is the gatekeeping and the perception that we put around games and the stories that we tell.
Exactly. In a way, the only ones who can limit ourselves is ourselves. So
Correct.
if we
Correct.
have people who come in there and are like, oh, this, thou shalt. And again, the one thing I want to mention too, before we move on to talk about 2020, is that, and yeah, that's interesting, Lone Wolf. Exactly. Like, expanding understanding expands the pie. That's 100% true. The other thing I want to mention about that quickly is there's a difference between people who, go and play games and then kind of like, I can do whatever, and they like thrash about and like make everyone else's experience miserable. Like, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are genuinely wanting to join a community and to become a part of. Thank you for the subscription, Theater Nerd 221. I think you're in the right place. I know that I know that it sounds like you and Dot know each other already. So, but thank you, Theater Nerd. I appreciate that very, very much. I appreciate it.
Theater Nerd is one of the dot lot.
Yay! I'm always happy to have the dot lot here. So yes, thank you. But yeah, so the experience of being able to bring people into this does not mean that people just come in and they do whatever they want. They come in and this is the part, they feel like they have a right now to be a part of the conversation with everybody else. And they start talking to everyone else, and they start working with everybody else. So think about it this way. For those of you who ever felt, and I'll raise my hand, I certainly did, whoever felt in middle school or high school like you were kind of like, I'm off to the side. I don't know what to make. I feel awkward and I don't know how to get, this is an opportunity for you to be allowed to come in and mingle with everyone else where people want you to come. Like the vast majority now of groups that I see are excited when new people want to play. The vast majority. The groups that are not like this, most of the time can go have their own fun with themselves, whatever fun that would be. But most people are like, yes, please come. We want to teach you. We want to learn. We want more people to play with. And that is such a wonderfully powerful, I think, feeling. And that's what we're talking about. So when you come in to a conversation, people kind of listen and they gradually feel things out and they gradually grow. And by the time they're done, they've just really deeply invested themselves into wonderful storytelling, which then transfers to other things. It transfers not just to games, but other forms. So, absolutely. I think.
Well, and I'll say this too, in terms of inclusivity, if we're going to just sit on that a moment. I think there are gaming companies that are trying to make that part. Gaming companies themselves are now taking major steps to become more inclusive, right? Like even Wizards of the Coast this year, in 2019, dropped basically a player's handbook that is and a DM's guide that is meant for people that have dyslexia, that can't look at charts, that can't deal with a lot of text. It's meant for kids and people that have reading disabilities, right? Super important. Accessibility. Evil Hat dropped an accessibility guide of how to bring accessibility to your table, right? We got, of course, you can look at some of the individuals out there that are contributing to safety tools, like Kiana, who and her team that are like building safety tools for keeping people comfortable, because you deal with difficult conversations and topics, like there are it's not just individuals that are opening up and accepting more gaming and the people in gaming. We're also getting it from the gaming companies, which I think is more important than ever before.
Absolutely.
That the gaming companies are stepping in, like even people like you guys heard me harp on capers early on when I was in the show, right? Written by my friend Craig.
Oh yeah.
Set in 1920 Prohibition, there was a lot of racism in America at that time. And he's like, don't worry about that. He's like, be whoever you want to be. Here's a mechanism if you want to be, if you're in a wheelchair, here's a mechanism for this. Here's a way where you can play whatever you want to play. No strings attached. And be who you need to be to tell the story. And I think that's also something really beautiful too. People are seeing themselves in the games where they weren't before.
That which is, oh man, that is, and representation in general, being able to see things, see yourself, so to speak, in a game is enormously important. So, that's interesting. And the dyslexia thing, because it is true, anyone who's ever DM'd or GM knows, like, oh my God, you have so much reading, because most of the time you do a ton of the work. You have to know not only your own rules, but know a lot of the character sort of ideas and concepts. Even if you're playing a narrative game, you have to be able to understand kind of the root of what that character is about. So you do a lot of reading, okay?
A lot of reading.
And and that's for people who are dealing with dyslexia and people for whom, reading is not immediately as natural
or
to
even
them.
people that have an attention deficit problem.
Or that,
like sitting down and reading that much text is hard.
Exactly.
You know what? Big secret I'm going to put out there. I've actually been talking with a few people about starting a project where we record tabletop books for GMs. It's audio. Wow. You listen to it.
That's a really great idea, Dot.
It requires a different format, because it's not like reading a book. Obviously, like you can't read through a chart to somebody on audio, but the core of things for people to put into an audio format for something like Audible or a podcast.
This is a great idea. Have you thought about doing that in like a crowdsourced or crowdfunding type of thing?
It literally is a fresh idea I've had for 2020. So I'm just now speaking with people about because think about it. How many people can't, or how many sites where your books and your PDFs aren't for the visually impaired?
Right. Of course.
It's important. That stuff is so, so important.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a really great idea. If there's anything I can help with that at some point, please let me know, because that's a great idea. I will tell a story about this. One of the most powerful moments that I ever personally saw has to do with a guy who I coached in our collegiate debate team, who was legally blind. And this is a guy who had a degenerative disease of the cornea, where periodically his cornea would degenerate and it'd have to be replaced. And he had been seen at Boston Eye and Ear Infirmary, which is one of the best in the world at this. I actually drove him once to an appointment where he had to get, he had to be checked in the hospital to get this done.
Hmm.
And so this is a guy who wanted to learn. He had really wanted to learn how to debate, and he was really impressed by it and everything. But listen, if you're going to debate in parliamentary debate, you have tons of arguments that you have to address, points that you have to hit. You've got people use notes, like a flow chart where you like write down what people
Correct.
say, you know, that sort of thing. And I remember he actually won the MIT debate tournament with my good friend Story, who was a tremendous debater. But and he won it. Not only did he win it, he won it by being enormously compelling as a speaker who had been able to do enough with notes and had worked through things enough that he was able to present himself as someone that if you did not know, if you didn't see him walking up with the cane because he needed it to get to the pedestal, to the podium,
Right.
if you did not, you know, other than that, you would have had no idea whatsoever that this was someone who had to struggle with issues of vision. It was incredibly impressive because he had everything down in terms of the rhetorical skill and so forth, and was able to do it picking up in other sort of formats. The thing that taught me was, number one, there were very, very few people in the debate circuit at that time they were not legally blind, and in fact accessibility in general was very much something that the circuit had not really dealt with. And number two, the fact that he was able to do this, the enormous power of watching him be able to go through and do it. And my job was to coach him as a debater. You know, he actually went out of his way to say, don't coach me, you know, as if I were, you know, as I'm the blind guy. Coach me as a debater. He said, but if you could do me a favor and write your notes up in double wide, if you could do that, I'm like, well, obviously I'm going to do that.
Yes,
and that was incredibly valuable. And so what I learned from that is, imagine how much smaller and cheaper our hobby is when it keeps people out who would otherwise be enormously impressive and great additions, let alone that it's the right thing to do. But beyond that, the amount of wonderful stuff that they would add to the community, that they provide to the community by being full members of it because it's made available to them. That is what accessibility is all about, beyond being just the right thing to do. So I think that's a great idea, the audio idea.
Yeah. I've actually considered putting it out as a podcast.
Yeah, I mean,
right? Because it's just it's a reference thing. They'd be kind of long. And I would obviously need permission from the companies to produce it that way. But
listen, I mean, you know what? I would love to see, I mean, who knows, maybe they wouldn't, but I would love to see you actually approach a company and then be like, yes, well, we don't really want to do that.
Sorry, we don't want that.
More people. We don't want the riffraff. Let's not have any more who are blind entering our hobby. I mean, good luck on that. Good God.
Yeah, right. Anyway,
that's a great idea.
Something for 2020 I've been simmering on. You know, I've even trying as a GM now on my channel to put closed captioning.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that. I saw that. There's some kind of web captioner or something. Does that work? Does it work? Because I want to start doing that.
So yes and no. My understanding, because I talked to a few people basically that are hearing impaired, and they basically said there's nothing better than somebody that's actually going to just type your stuff live. They're going to get it more correct and better punctuation than like an automated thing that just listens to your voice and churns out words, right? Okay. So you can pay a person by the hour to sit and use a program, and on their end they listen and they type, and it feeds it closed caption. But there are some programs online. The biggest issue I'm finding is that I don't have a way for it to capture all of us at once. So everybody has to open the website, send me their individual link, and I have to capture each of those if I want everybody's captioned like individual.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so.
So that's a little, that's the harder part, is captioning everybody. But worth it if you're talking about a large piece of inclusivity.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to think more about that. Because that is really important.
And I do have a couple people in the community that do live closed caption or live captioning. That's what they do for their job. So there are people out there that believe in it and understand the importance of it, because, you know, like YouTube will do the captioning after you load the video, but what if they want to watch live?
Right.
You got a lot of people, you got a lot of mouths moving. Lip reading's not an option anymore. Not everybody can lip read. So yeah, it's been interesting. I took this leadership class in 2019, and I think it's what's really spurned my interest in the, like, a level of inclusivity, and realize the privilege I have to be able to see, to read long text, you know, to hear, and just the simple things that you don't think about. And so there was actually somebody that was a mute in my leadership class. And so she had somebody there signing for her all the time.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting to like watch the process of communication and the things that they have to overcome. So yeah, it was just really interesting. I'm trying in 2020 to find a way to encompass that on a larger scale in what I'm doing and how I'm producing. So
that's a good call. I know, yeah, I'm definitely, because I've been interested in that for a while. The last few months in particular, I've been starting to think more and more about it, and so I want to look into the captioning thing as a beginning to that. And yeah, Lone Wolf, I agree. I mean, listen, I have to make accommodations for students, and I'm happy to do so because they are, again, I would not be doing my job if I thought it was an imposition. It is not. But yeah, so that I think is, again, this is all about democratization and access, and I think those are all good things. And does not limit, but actually enriches, the way that these things work.
It expands our tribe. It does not minimize it.
That is correct. So what do you think? So I guess you mentioned one such example that you're sort of excited to look into, which is more representation. What other sort of thing in 2020, and same question, so you can talk about a particular game you're really pumped up about, but also what trend? I mean, is it you're looking, you think there will be more of this in the tabletop industry? You think they'd be more focused on that? Or what's the thing that you think is, give me your crystal ball, what's going to happen when we have this discussion next late December / early January 2021? What will people be chatting about happened this year in the tabletop world?
So that's interesting. I guess I could talk about a game, which I might still mention at the end. Okay. But it's interesting when you pose it that way. I'm seeing it. I don't even know. It's hard to say, like, well, this is a trend. Like, what do I know? Like, what's data and statistics do I have?
Oh, excuse me. You were no. You were a member. You were a Little Red Dot. You're also a member of the Master of the Dungeon show. So clearly,
therefore, we know all.
Our knowledge is supreme. We're not gatekeepers, but we know everything.
We know all the things. Yeah. No. There seems to me that there's a little bit of a trend where podcasts are stepping out of the D&D realm. There was a very large period of time over the last 5 years where every tabletop podcast was a D&D podcast.
True.
And where I think what's happening, which is the beautiful thing, is that our audiences are wanting more. Mm-hmm. And so the podcasts are evolving because our audiences are evolving, which is kind of cool. Yeah. It's kind of cool. So I think that's something that's really interesting that I'm seeing that's just kind of maybe a light trend. And I could be wrong. Who knows? In 2 years' time, everybody could be back to D&D podcasting.
Remember when we thought podcasts will be a thing? Nobody
nobody listens to podcasts anymore. But yeah, so I don't know. I think that's a trend that I'm seeing. I think we are seeing the rise of indie tabletop. We're seeing this, and again, I'm not working in one of these indie houses, so I don't know in terms of sales and things like that, but there is a market for it. Like I just looked back at the Kickstarters alone for tabletop games, like indie ones, like written by just a small handful of people. Like, what was the one that Grant Ellis just put out? Grimoire?
Right. Yes.
Right. And it excelled. Part of it is because of who's behind it. So there's something to be said about the individual too in the process, which is kind of cool. But that you're seeing a lot of success and interest in other tabletop games, other stuff. Really interesting things. I was trying to think of one of the more obscure ones that maybe dropped. I mean, there's tons. Like even something like Honey Heist. That's an indie game, a single page RPG. I think that that's
or Lasers and Feelings. By the way,
Lasers and Feelings. It
blew me away. Maybe you knew this. I didn't. I had no idea that Lasers and Feelings was written also by by the Scum and Villainy designer by Harper. Right?
Yeah.
Like I had no idea. And I'm like, any guy who can design both Blades in the Dark.
Both is a hero.
Yeah. Like
total hero status. Yeah. Kids on Bikes, another great one. Like I'm running, actually, I loved Kids on Bikes so much the few times that I ran it in 2019. It's coming to my channel in 2020 as a staple for Sunday Fun Day, which is my community game. I'm finding people like to tell stories from perspectives of kids because all of us have something, that process of childhood comes and goes so quickly. So now here we are as adults, and it's nice to be able to go back and go, oh, could I do this again and do it differently?
Oh God, yeah.
Do it better.
Yep.
Maybe I was the good kid. Maybe I need to rebel. Maybe I need to be that rebellious child that never existed. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think there's this huge rise, and we're even seeing companies like you all know I'm a huge Renegade Games fan, and I'm excited to announce that I will be playing Renegade Games across my channel starting in 2020, at
Woo.
least until June.
Basically, Dot
But
is your Renegade source. Like if you
I am
want
your Renegade
Renegade,
source.
Dot's where it's at.
But they started out as board games. They started out as a board game company.
Yeah.
And their board games were so interactive and so on the cusp of storytelling. Like, look at something like the North Sea epilogues, which is all, or the North Sea, yeah, that's what it's called, epilogues, or the board games, which are the North Sea games, are all the Viking board games. And they had a huge run of success. And they said, wait a second, there's enough story in a series of board games that we could turn around and put out a tabletop. And they did. And so there's also a really interesting trend of where our tabletop games, I think, are going to start coming from.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool that you can get your preface to a tabletop game in a bunch of board games.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, that there is a lot of crossover, I think, where more and more of these board games in both directions. I think you see certain board gaming elements that have obviously come into some of the RPG stuff where things switch from one to the other. And you can have people that immediately are like, now I want to imagine this is happening on some kind of a map. And yes, it's still theater of the mind somewheres, but not all the time. You know, a lot of RPGs, especially narrative RPGs, I think are getting a lot more crunchy, and I'm going to come to that when I talk about what I think is on the way in 2020 possibly. But it obviously in the other direction, where a lot of board games now are, you know, more and more and more story driven, where the best you got for that stuff back in the day was if you were playing a game like my favorite board game of all time, which is the Talisman board games. But those were really, I mean, the best you got there were the stories that you built together as your character did whatever they did. And there were little flavor text things on the cards and all that stuff. And that's one thing. But I mean, now where you have people like Ryan Laureate, who did Above and Below and Near and Far, he has a new game that was coming out, which I can't remember the name of now, which was on Kickstarter and did very well. That is this big sort of a sea roaming cooperative game where it's intended to take like many hours. I don't remember how many hours, 40, 50 hours. And so you're supposed to just literally just play it with friends for a couple of hours, and then you can save it in quotes almost at any place. It's very story driven, and it essentially goes back to this GM-less, you know, play that you were talking about before.
Oh, that's another game by Renegade, Icarus, right?
Right.
Icarus.
Yeah, you told me. Yeah,
another one that's about like all you guys do together is build up a civilization and watch it fall.
Yeah.
Like there's some basic human piece to that, you know. I just think it's so cool, but it's also a GM-less, card-based, question-based RPG.
Which, by the way, I think that's also something to remember, is that most gamers actually don't like just playing the one single game and that's it. Yes, you have people who are fanatics for a particular system, but even those people will like trying to play other stuff that they will, you know, and sometimes you have to have the code gateway to kind of move them away from the particular thing. But most of these people like to play different kinds of games, which is why a lot of people will buy multiple storytelling games and play things like, you know, tabletop role-playing games. So you have kids who will play Tales from the Loop or Kids on Bikes or, you know, whatever the case may be.
Honey Heist,
Or Honey Heist. And then they will also get, you know, Lords of Waterdeep, and then they'll also get a game like Near and Far, Above and Below, a storytelling game, or they will also get Journeys in Middle-earth. So they want to be able to play these systems because not only are we hardwired to tell stories, we are hardwired to tell different kinds of them. And by the way, if you think about what we do when we sleep and we dream, our brain processes many things that happen throughout the course of our day, which is why dreams often seem oddly prescient and very weird. Like they don't seem to fit exactly, but then they seem like they fit as we're going through them.
They help us work out our problems.
Exactly.
Dreaming does. It helps us deal with the things that our awake mind cannot.
Exactly. And I would argue that our awake mind also tries to do aspects of that. And I think that's what a lot of this gaming is. I think really what we're doing in trying to tell different stories is work out various things that concern us in some way, whether it's, you know, obvious, like I want, as you just said, you know, I want to go back to my childhood and like live my life differently than the way I had my ass routinely kicked, you know, every day going to high school. I'd like to be a different kind of person. But there are other cases where issues elsewhere in our lives come out that we want to explore through a given game. And sometimes that is a video game, and sometimes that's a shooter, and sometimes it's a story-based game, and sometimes it's a particular RPG. So there's variety in the way that we want to tell stories and play games with the stories that we tell that I think also works out aspects of us too.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's really neat stuff. So,
what about you? What do you think is coming?
So I think one of the biggest things that we're going to see coming up in 2020 is going to be an attempt to find not the system, but a system that is going to combine together more clearly narrative story-based systems and crunch. Because my feeling is what happened was people, we had crunchy systems, and if you go back to the 1980s, you had very, very crunchy, hardcore kind of war game, board game, like Avalon Hill rule books out to here that no one could understand but the rule book maker, and not even that person, and whatever. And you had that stuff, right, which was very kind of exclusive and restricted a lot of people in a lot of ways. And I'm sure it was fun for people who wanted to find out how long rations would last in Russia in 1930, but like I don't know. I was not one of those people. Anyway, so you had that, and then you had this increasing focus on story and narrative games that we've talked about. But what I've noticed, and I started thinking about this actually when you were speaking about this, I have noticed a lot of these narrative games now, you go into it thinking to you're like, yes, here I will get some nice fluff and flavor text. And then they're like, add the following 6 charts with the thing. And I'm like, Jesus, like they are actually a lot crunchier, I think, some of the new systems that I've seen than I would have expected. And thank you, Theater Nerd. And then Theater Nerd gives a tier 1 sub to Little Red Dot. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Theater Nerd. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. You are my favorite theater nerd here so far, in the last hour. Thank you, Theater Nerd. I appreciate it. But yeah, so I think what you're beginning to see is narrative systems. And I don't know if this is because narrative game designers are like, go to hell. Like I'm going to give you crunch, or whether they really do want to be able to have the mechanic of a game so that it doesn't just feel like, it doesn't just feel like you're putting like a little skin on it and you're saying, okay, this is this game, but really it's just basically us talking to each other. They really want to say, no, this enables you to make a story in a different and better way because of various mechanics that are part of it. So I think the mechanics, so
we have to remember that it adds a level of, I don't know, ambiguity and unknown. I just mentioned a game that I'll be playing in the summer called Outbreak Undead. And one of the things that I think is really cool about it is on the character sheet is your DNA strand. And when you become affected, there's a slow process of like coloring and the way that you morph and mutate and like as you become a zombie, which I think is so interesting for storytelling purposes. Yeah. It's a visual representation in a game-based way that flips everything around and gives you a chance to RP something. So it's not like this, I wake up and now I'm a zombie. It could be a slow process. Do you start growing? Are you is there like mold or fungus or various things? But then there's the process of like coloring in the DNA strand. What's dying of you? How are you changing? And like, it's cool. There are some of those crunchy, I guess you could say, mechanisms that can be used to really encourage role play.
Right.
And help build, especially for people that like aren't, I say this all the time. There are a lot of people that aren't comfortable with the concept of acting, but I don't think that's what role playing is.
This gives them this is, well, just for quickly, if I may, this is exactly what you talked about with giving people permission, right? In a way, these rule systems allow those people to have the permission to role play.
Correct.
Because they're like, well, this is what the system told me to do. I'm just playing in the system, right? So.
Yep, and this is that thing now, and I think that there is a large level of comfortability that it can add, and helping hand, really, maybe that's the word I'm looking for, that it can help with some people who find role playing more difficult, right? I can say literally how many times I may look at a player and go, what does your sheet say? It's okay to do that. It's okay to look at your sheet and go, what does your sheet say?
Yep.
And that can also always help put you back on track. So it's a really beautiful mix that you're not gonna find in any other art form, I feel. And yes, I consider it an art form.
Oh, I mean, that's, there's no question about that at all. I mean, and I think so I think that there's going to be a lot more of that. I think you're going to see, and of course you've seen some of it already, but I do not in any way mean to say people watching this later or whatever, that there's some enormous dichotomy and that the story-based games are over here. I'm not saying that. Obviously, there are variations in all of this, but I do think that there has been an increased emphasis that I've seen in some of the newer story-based games coming out to try to have unique and unusual rule systems. And you know, in no way does that mean that they are. I'm not saying that they're being defensive about it, but I think that they're responding. And by the way, this reminds me very much of the period that I got my doctorate in was Renaissance drama, and a great deal of Renaissance drama gained its power. Dot will agree with me, I think, on this as a person who's acted quite a bit of Shakespeare, in Shakespeare and others being in dialogue with each other. So it's because Shakespeare dialogued with Webster, with Beaumont, with Fletcher, with Johnson, with Chapman, with right, and the list goes on and on with, you know, all of these characters. All of these figures spoke to each other, and in their drama and in their work, and sometimes they spoke directly to each other, but also through their work. And so these things are responses to each other, so that Hamlet is a response to the Spanish tragedy. The Merchant of Venice is a response largely to the Jew of Malta, and Christopher Marlowe's work. Dr. Faust, God, how many times has Faust been done? Dr. Faustus, Faust, but like there are multiple versions of that same story which are in dialogue with each other. So I think that RPG systems are very much that same way. These systems are responding to things. A lot of them initially were responding to D&D and what they saw as the limitations of that, only because it was one of the first. But D&D itself was a response to war games, and different editions responded to each other. And conversations are inherently dynamic and interesting. And so for us to play in systems like that is a wonderful way to kind of advance and move things forward. And you know, oftentimes I feel a system maybe doesn't work as well when it feels like it's just sort of been off in its own test tube, you know, and it's like it has no, so you'll hear people like, oh, this the brand new system of blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, I mean, I saw that in the following 3 things, you know, as if they didn't want to be in dialogue with previous systems that existed. That's, to me, is silly and limiting. And so I think that there is going to be more of that, you know, marriage of crunch, you know, the right level of crunch, let's say, with kind of narrative and storytelling. And again, vice versa. Games will not be able to survive, I think, just doing it based on only the crunch. I think you need both. And so I think you're going to see a sort of movement of that to each other in 2020. And, you know, it's going to take a lot more than a year to do this, but I think that will advance. And I predict there will be a couple of cases where you'll have some game that will come out that will really stand there and people will go, wow, this is something I want to do. Like the effect that Gloomhaven had when it came out on the board game side. And people were just like, wow, you know, that kind of thing I think we will see happen with a couple of these games going forward. So
I would agree.
So, all right, well, let's talk a little bit then about things that product review stuff and things that we were excited about. I'm going to go first so that I can get it out of the way because I want to hear Dot talk about some of it because she was telling me off stream what she wanted to talk about. So I'm excited about it.
I got a little excited.
All right, so this is the non-tabletop one, and then I'll talk about tabletop. I have had more fun with this than any board game over the last couple of years. So I got for Christmas Journeys in Middle-earth. I have to tell you, this game, now this is Fantasy Flight, and Fantasy Flight does a lot of games, and therefore people are kind of up and down about them. I understand because they're the big one of the big, you know, elephants in the room. But I obviously am a Tolkien nut, and so I'm going to get this stuff. I'm telling you right now, what they did with this was they basically took an app-based system because there's a free companion app which you get that plays with it. Then they give you a bunch of the pieces in the story, and then they basically say, now you're going to take these characters. There's 5 to choose from, and you can play anyone from solo, which is the way I've been playing it, all the way up to 5 people, and you're going to take them through these adventures and campaigns, and the app controls how the map tiles are laid out, what the objectives are, and how different things are kind of coordinated. So what it does is it allows the app to handle a lot of the sort of fuzzy and frankly crunchy stuff maybe that we wouldn't necessarily like doing as much. Not only is the game sort of beautiful to look at, which is standard stuff for Fantasy Flight, so it just has like awesome awesome like tiles and like just cards of every description and all sorts of like I'm not going to be, it's not going to be able to do it justice, but like just these things. But the way that it constructs it, it puts it together, over time, you level weapons, you level items, and most importantly, you learn more of the lore, which makes you more capable of adventuring, not just as yourself, but with others and companions. I have had an absolute ball playing this game. And I think one of the reasons, in addition to the Tolkien stuff, it feels very Middle-earthy, so that's good. But the other reason is that, again, it goes back to this sort of GM-less thing where it's fully cooperative, and I like games like that anyway, and it's fully cooperative where you're working together for common purpose without necessarily having the alpha player problem that sometimes pops up in co-op games where one person's like, oh, I'm going to do this, you should do that, you should do that, which is very annoying and basically means one person's playing it solo anyway. Like it's, very irritating. This happens in Pandemic a lot if you've ever played that. The alpha player Pandemic phenomenon is a real one and not fun. So this one, I think, avoids a lot of that problem by making the roles extremely different and by making the nature of how each person contributes to the overall adventure quite different, but very synchronous at the same time with everyone in there. So I really, really like this game a lot. And of course, it's very expandable because you can get other, app expansions that will allow you, they already have one of them as it is, that will allow you to do other adventures, and you can save multiple campaigns. And since the game randomizes where the map tiles are and everything like that, and even, I'm going to spoil one little aspect of it just to make this one point, one of the adventures takes place in an inn where you're trying to find this one spy, and there are multiple guests in the inn. So one of the things you have to do is go around and interrogate each of them using tests of various like feats of strength or kind of like witticisms to get them off their guard or to like talk to them about philosophy and whatever. And the game randomizes who the actual spy is every time and the clues that would lead you to accuse that spy. So in this one particular case, I was going around interrogating people. I found one person that I thought was the spy. And then but then the guy actually said, oh, but so-and-so over there, that person has the following whatever wound that I thought I had been looking for. So like a moron, I'm like, okay, I'll go over to that guy. I accuse him, and it turns out that's the wrong guy, and all hell breaks loose, and like, all these goblins come in and, shenanigans. This is what happens when I'm done. But the point is, I was so impressed with the fact that I could have played that scenario 6 or 7 different times and had different combinations of clues, not all of which I would have seen every time, different kinds of clues and different people who are responsible. And that's what a kind of app-based thing can do. So this is very cool. It is not cheap. My understanding, having looked it up, is that this is close to like $70-$80, but it's got hours and hours and hours and hours of play. And if you like storytelling games and if you like Tolkien, oh my God. So I am a huge fan of this. I'm a huge fan of this board game. It's like crazy. So that's my board game. I was so excited. So and that's a good call. That's a good call, Echo. Yes, the Humble Bundle 5e Lord of the Rings, which right now is on sale for like $15, and you can get 5 books from Cubicle 7 because they're not doing Adventures to Middle-earth anymore in a couple of months. Now's the time. So jump on that if you haven't already, because it's awesome. Okay. Now, second thing is Eberron Rising from the Last War. I've been talking about I've been so excited for this book because I love Eberron. Everything about this book. In fact, I'm thinking of even doing a stream where I just talk like fanboy out about how awesome this all is. Because part of it is, so it's D&D, but it alters every single race to be doing different things. First of all, there are races in here that are brand new. So you have shifters who are those with lycanthropic backgrounds in the distant past. So they can't turn into werewolves, but they can become more bestial in particular ways. There are characters that are bound to spirits of light called Kalashtar. And so the Kalashtar basically spend much of their time feeling they look like humans, but they always feel a little bit off because partly what they're doing is they're always in dialogue with spirits in addition to being in dialogue with humans. They have changelings, which are basically like essentially doppelgangers, shapeshifters. There are dragon-marked houses. There are warforged characters in here. There are group patrons, which I love this idea of having an organization organization that basically the whole party can work for if they wish, like a criminal syndicate or a spy outfit, an espionage outfit, or an adventurers guild, or a newspaper. You can have a group of people that works for a newspaper to find the best stories, and they send you out to, like, it's a world that is so fully realized and has been so lovingly put together by Keith Baker, who was the one who first made this, and then, you know, obviously all the fine folks from Jeremy Crawford to Mike Merles to Christopher Perkins. This is beautiful stuff, and it is just so well done in terms of how it constructs the world. I mean, like airships and lightning rails and Warforged, I'm already on board, but like all the other cool stuff on here is super, super cool. So when Curse of Strahd comes to an end, this I'm very seriously considering asking all of my wonderful players in that campaign, including Dot, if they may want to give this a whirl, because there's so much cool stuff.
I see what you did there, Arv. You waited till you were live to tell everybody before asking me privately, so that I can't say no.
I don't know what you mean by that. I just happened to have you here, and I brought it up, and now back you into a corner. I don't know. What
and tell me how much you love it, and
how great my players, how great you are as a player, and how much you.
I see. I get you.
Super excited. I love that book. It's awesome. So, please tell me, Dot, the cool stuff that you got that you wanted to chat about.
Yeah.
Party game and otherwise.
I was about to say, oh yes, okay. I gotta let me grab it off the shelf because it's worth just putting your eyes on. Hang on a second.
Oh, it's so good, Lone Wolf, Eberron. It's and you know, and everyone's like, well, why not Dark Sun?
This game,
but Eberron.
This game, we played it Christmas Day. It was given to me as a Secret Santa gift at my job, and literally they nailed it. It's called Throw Burrito.
Okay, I've never heard of this. I can't wait.
Okay, it's a brilliant card game. It's basically ages 7 and up. It comes with 2 foam burritos. Here they are.
Okay.
You know what? I'm going to open this up.
I'm already on board.
And it's a card-based game, and the idea is you're trying to throw burritos at one another. And so you set the burritos, these little, see, they feel like doggy toys. They're like foam.
Okay.
And look how cute they are. So you get 2. You set them in the middle of the table, and you pass out cards. Everybody gets their own like face down deck and hand in their cards. And you're trying to make pairs in your hand. Right? It's just poker. But instead of going like turn by turn by turn, everybody's working at the same time. So you're grabbing cards from your right and discarding them on your left. Everybody's doing that. So you're taking their cards and you're trying to make trio sets. And when you do, it'll either be war, duel, or I can't remember what the other one is. But basically, like at war, the 2 people on your right and left have to reach for burritos and be the first one to toss it at the other person.
Okay.
A duel, you have to get up.
This is what I was referring to, by the way. The combination of story-based and crunch is literally throw burrito.
Throw burrito. Yeah, here it is. If you get a duel, the person who lays the duel cards down gets to pick who goes into a duel, and you have to get up from the table. Each of you take a burrito. You put your backs to one another. You take 3 paces, turn, and throw it at the other person.
How do you now? Do you like the person who inflicts the most damage with said?
No, it's the first person to hit the other person with a burrito.
But how do you win? Like, you just that's how you win.
Everybody else is the person who calls the duel judges the duel.
Okay, but are you and you're trying to win a certain number of duels, or are you okay?
Yeah, so you're trying to win a certain number. If you so there are these little this game is so ridiculous. There are these little tokens. Let's see if I can show them to you at home. They're little burritos. It's too bright. And they have X's on them. When you lose, you get one of these. And so there are only 6 of them. And when all 6, like you've had 6 failures, the round is over.
Okay.
It's kind of how it works. And then the 2 people with the most of these have to do a final duel to see who loses.
It's like a last stand. Like,
yeah, it's like a last stand. It's like who's been hit by the most burritos? Well, now you're going into I'm telling you, I played this with a bunch of adults on Christmas, right? My partner and I went over to his dad's house, and all of their friends come over on Christmas Day and play games. And so I was like, well, I've got a game I've not played yet. You guys want to play Throw Burrito? And we literally, one of his dads was like, not in the house. You're going to have to take your dueling outside. So every time somebody would lay a duel down, we would get up, we'd grab our burritos, we'd go to the front yard, and we as grown adults would duel with foam burritos in the front yard of this neighborhood. I have a video of it. I'm not lying to you. I laughed till my sides hurt. It is stupid fun. This is stupid fun.
I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, like, this. What's not to like? I mean, I love that it's a dodgeball card game. It's
basically a dodgeball card game. The burritos are so cute. I've thought about adding them. Here. There you go.
Just adding them to the. Well, right. I mean, like, is there ever any guilt at the fact you're throwing these poor burritos at each other? Like, that's, you know.
Well, that's up to you. It's first person to it. So, and the other card set is war, which is everybody at the table. So we played with a table of 4, but you can play with a table up to 8 and you only have 2 burritos. So the more people you have, the more rush it is to grab burritos when you go into war, because all 8 people are fighting for a burrito. So then you toss a burrito. If you don't hit anyone, somebody else can pick that burrito up and hit another person. Like, it's chaos. It is chaos.
That's like, yeah. And Coven Guy, I have Past the Pigs is the new version of Pigmania. I have the original version of that, which is awesome. My daughter loves a game called Happy Salmon. I don't know if you know this game where you like
salmon.
Yeah, you like, oh my God, there's like a bunch of cards. You're all stand around a table. You're trying to find pairs, and it's basically, the game Pit, where you like,
yes,
you get a bunch. Okay, so it's sort of like that. You get the card, and then you're yelling at someone like high five, high five, high five. And if someone else has a high five, you high five them and then drop the card. But there's crazy things, including Happy Salmon, which is where you take your hand with someone else and then you do like this. Basically, so it's like a salmon. It's the stupidest, but again, it's one of these things where it's very physically connected. Okay, so throw
let's see
burrito.
If I can throw burrito. I was gonna try to show you guys the cards. My light's a bit bright. I bet I can take it down so I'm still showing to you. So the person with the most matches actually like wins, and then whoever. So this is the Goth Sloth. This is a trio set that you can make, the Goth Sloth.
Okay.
Here's the Meow Cow. It has a cat space. Where's the cow's body? This is the Licky Chicky. One chick is licking the other chick. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Licky Chicky.
The Floaty Goaty. He has little floats on.
The company that made Exploding Kittens made Throw Burrito. Okay, this makes much more sense.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, the Lager Dogger. It's just like it's ridiculous. And then these are kind of what the burrito cards look like. So you need 3 of these to start a war, or this is a brawl, right? And then here's the burrito duel. He's got look, he's got little revolvers at his hips.
I also note the 70s styling of the box, by the way. I like
like the color scheme, all of it is
God.
brilliant. It's a really brilliant game. So this, like I said, was a Secret Santa gift given to me from somebody else who actually was at Gen Con and played it there because they were testing it and went and supported the Kickstarter and got an extra copy. And she was like, "This was the perfect gift for you." So anyways, this is how I ended up with Fresh Burrito as an adult on Christmas Day, throwing burritos in the front yard.
This is, I mean, listen, that's the way to bring it to, that's holidays.
So that's why when you said board game, I was like, I don't know if this qualifies as a board game, but it deserves to be talked about.
Yeah, it's a war game, not a board game.
It's a war game.
Coven Guys like Lager Dogger or Lager Dogger. One's a lumberjack and the other's a hipster. Yes. Well done, Coven Guy. I award you 5 cool points. That's really funny. All right, so that was your board game. Do you have a exciting tabletop one? I mean, I know you've talked about Renegade. Is there any particular one that you want to highlight?
I got pretty excited the last time I chatted with all of you about Overlight.
Yes.
You guys have had me give that spill. So I am running an Overlight campaign. That will be in March, I think, is when that kicks up, like end of March and into April. I'm going to run a full campaign session, but actually, this is what I'm not going to be running on my channel. I don't GM a lot off my own channel. I just play for a lot of people, but I am going to be GMing over on Unmade Gaming's channel, and I am very excited. Next Thursday, I kick off a Coriolis campaign, and I have to say, it's one of those books that has a lot of text.
Yeah, talk about this, because I had never heard about this before you brought it up.
So Coriolis, for those of you that don't know, is a Free League game. If you haven't checked out Free League, you should. They make a lot of really good stuff. What is it? Mutant Zero, Mutant something Zero is another one of their big ones that everybody loves. So Free League's made a few things. My favorite game is Coriolis. So for those of you that like low sci-fi, and like something that's a little darker even than Scum and Villainy, at least than my Scum and Villainy campaign, Coriolis is it. The aesthetic is basically Arabian Nights in space. So if that doesn't sell you, it should. Yeah. Basically, it takes place in a place called the Third Horizon, which is a set of 36 systems that are connected by these alien portals that connect all of them together. And through a long history with the humans leaving Earth and becoming lost in space, different generations of humans slowly integrate into the Third Horizon, and it causes a lot of political issues. It's a very mythos based game. So for those of you those you GMs out there that really love mythology deeply embedded into your stuff, this is like supreme. I actually went back and I read a child's version, but whatever, of Arabian Nights over the holidays because I was like, I want to get back into like that mindset. Incredible. The First Comes, which are the early humans to the Third Horizon, they worship something called the icons. The kind of concept of the game is that the darkness between the stars, that's what they call it, is ever encroaching. It is this place that creates voids in both humanity and in other, like brings out monsters and creatures. And so you just the icons, these 9 icons, are what protect us from the darkness between the stars. And so there's a lot of this kind of spiritual piece to it, which is really beautiful. Mm-hmm. And it comes with something called the icon deck. Each icon has 4 cards, and it's like tarot. So as a player, your players are required to choose an icon because it gives them something. So the icons like the messenger, the dancer, the faceless, the deckhand, so forth and so on. And they, throughout the game, if you as a GM see a moment, they say a prayer, they do a thing, they're in a moment of need and they call upon their icon, they can draw a card from the icon deck and play it. And then it's like tarot, you interpret the icon card as the GM. So I actually had all 4 of my players yesterday in session 0 draw their icon card. So one of them's the deckhand and he got asteroids. One of them's the faceless. I can't remember what he got. One of them is the judge, and they pulled blood. One of them is the traveler, and they pulled the forest. So I now can take these kind of image-based things and drive story for each of my characters based on it, right? So
interesting. It's like an element of like almost Dixit or Mysterium tied into this too. Mm-hmm. I wasn't, because I when she first brought this up to me, I was thinking about how much this seemed like it reminded me a little bit of Stargate. There was some other sort of elements there of, as she said, Firefly and so forth. Like there were some other things there in addition to the Arabian Nights business. But I mean, like, and also, and Deep Space Nine as well.
Deep Space Nine, yeah.
But yeah, that's wow, that's super cool.
Yeah. And the thing is that everybody that shares the Third Horizon, they don't know where these portals came from. They don't actually know who left them here. Some believe that the icons built them millennia ago and left them behind. Other people believe it was an alien race, but we continue to use them. So there's also a lot of mystery around just portal hopping in general, and it can make space travel very dangerous. The last group of humans to come to the Third Horizon came on a ship called the Zenith, and they basically ripped the Zenith apart and built a massive space station that became this new beacon of like light, hope, and commerce and things like that in the Third Horizon. And the space station's called Coriolis. And there are all these factions that work on it. There's a lot of politics and intrigue. So if you're looking for, let me tell you this, if you're looking for VTM in space, this is it. The difference is that there's no like humanity loss, but there is sanity loss.
Interesting.
Because the idea is that as you spend more time in the darkness between the stars, your sanity begins to go. The things that you see, some humans have been said to catch diseases that turn them into these darkless, they actually call them jinn, space jinn, that haunt the darkness between the stars like ghosts. And so there is this very dark undertone to it. I think Babylon 5 is the closest, at least in the vibe of how I think I'm going to run it. It's dark. It's a dark sci-fi. And I'm very excited about it.
It's literally dark.
Really beautiful. Yeah, it's literally dark. It's really beautiful. And I'm hoping for the first time I'll be able to keep my giggles on wraps and actually run kind of a dark, serious campaign. So we'll see how it goes. I've got 12 sessions with them, so I'm very excited. For those of you that haven't checked it out, I highly encourage it. And I know that the writers, so Free League is basically a group of like 4 or 5 guys who write everything for Free League. And they have written a bunch of expansions too. So Coriolis does have a deep history and there's all this back stuff. But if you really like modules, they have some really cool ones. I'm actually, you were talking about this, the modularization piece where we like pull from here and we pull from there.
Yeah.
I'm doing that with this campaign. There's a module that's an early module. And you're supposed to be the crew of this ship that basically you wake up and you're hurling yourself into a star and you don't know how you got here. And part of the entire campaign is you getting off the ship before you land into an exploding sun and figuring out how you got to this point. That's the campaign. and it's really cool. And it feeds into one of the very first major campaigns that they wrote for Coriolis. So I'm actually skipping over it and sending my crew out to find this missing ship.
Oh, cool.
And so they're not playing that group. They're going to find it and then pick up into this next storyline. So again, a really cool modularization piece. I think the aesthetic of it is incredible.
So much like Prometheus too. Like, I mean,
yes,
these are all
feels like
these
Prometheus.
are all good influence references. It's just like these are things where I'm like, wow, it's really tickling this,
tickling that spot, because Scum and Villainy filled a spot for me. It filled my Serenity, my Rogue One need. Where we did some shenanigans in space.
Yep.
This is filling a much deeper, kind of richer storytelling that I'm excited for as a GM, and I really hope my players are excited for. Because for me, I find that this kind of story, I mean, you guys know how much I love VTM, right? Really pushes your role-playing ability, your storytelling ability, and how we apply games to that. So I'm pretty excited about it. Pretty excited.
It's pretty neat. And they actually, I was just going over to look. It made 1.2 million kroner, and I'm like, oh god. So I went, and it actually works out to, so it made over $130,000 US on Kickstarter. Which is a good amount of money for an RPG. I mean, like, by comparison, Emberwind that I was involved with made something like 55,000. But I mean, that's
which is nothing to blink at. You know what? Let me quick link. I know.
And they did.
And I actually think they went through Paradox to release this. That was so Free League Publishing is the group.
Right.
And I think Paradox had their hand in on this one as well. Here we go. Yeah. It comes highly recommended by me. This one here, the Emissary Lost. That's the Mercy of the Icons Part 1 is what some of the influence of my campaign is coming from. The prequel to that is the one where the ship goes missing and all that jazz.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys can check that out right here. Let me drop this in chat for all of you.
Yeah, very cool.
I heard Norwegian currency. Yes, you did. But they've got a couple other games. Mutant Year Zero, Tales from the Loop.
Yep, it's Tales from the Loop, right?
Yep, Tales from the Loop. Symbaroum, which is very popular if you like dark fantasy and you want like proper dark fantasy. There's some interesting stuff in Symbaroum that you're not gonna find. I've not found in another tabletop, but definitely not D&D for my fantasy. So that's a pretty cool system too.
Yeah, and I was, as I talked about, I was super impressed during our big ArvCon. Sorry, not ArvCon. During our big closeout of the Icarus Kickstarter last year, where I did with Video Store Cowboy, and Tren was on that, and Terry Tunes and Pyron Jade for a while. One of the things we played was Tales from the Loop, and I had heard about it, but I've never. And part of this just Johnny did a wonderful job in GMing it, but I was like. I really was like, this is like 80s creepy Twin Peaks, like, and I was so impressed by how well they just nailed it.
They nail it.
Of absolutely everything.
They're the group that's putting out the new Aliens RPG.
Free League
is the ones that, okay. And by the way, I had a chance to play that. That game's stupidly amazing.
Really, yeah.
I had the best time. Now, we did like an 8-hour stream, so it was really long, but the Aliens RPG has 2 different settings for GMs. It has a cinematic setting, which is set up to basically be just like a movie, death for all. It's intense. And then they have like a campaign mode, which is more like Prometheus. You're traveling through space and the aliens only come up every once in a while. But it's more about losing your mind and turning against one another, and more player versus player in the campaign mode. And then the alien, of course, comes in at the end. But really well done. The stress system in that game is incredible because Free League uses dice pool.
Mm-hmm.
They use a dice pool system of D6, and in Aliens, the more stress that you take, meaning when you get yourself the more stress, the more dice you get to add to your dice pool. So sometimes you can do better simply because you're adding more dice, but it's because you're more and more stressed, and all your ones go to the side. And you have repercussions for having a lot of those. Like, if you want to check out the Aliens game I played in, we did a playtest of it at Roll For It Con. You can go check out Roll For It's YouTube, and it's out there. It's in 4 parts. It was a very long session, and it was amazing. I had a stupid amount of good fun. Granted, I ended up playing like the Ripley character, but her name was Santos, and she okay. usually we talk about like one of our favorite moments from a game, so I'm
Yeah.
going to toss us in here at the end before we wrap up.
Mhm.
My character had realized these creatures are on board and were let loose, and they were at the core of a frozen rock, a reactor. They were at a reactor, and they need to get everybody to the surface. It was 9 miles to the surface. So she's gathering all the people, and the aliens attack from the air vents as all the people gather. And so one of them picks me up, and I had made a bunch of Molotov cocktails. And I, thanks to my GM's poor rolls and my great rolls, managed to kill an alien by stabbing it in its open mouth with a broken glass bottle. It was intense. They had me like open it. When it opened its mouth, I killed it. It was very cool.
Wow.
It was very cool. It really, really was. Then, of course, I went petrified after that because I was frozen with absolute fear after I killed it, and my arm started to get eaten away a little bit, from blood and all that.
But still,
Very
you
cool.
killed an alien with a bottle.
But still, I killed an
bottle.
alien. I actually joked, I think, on screen. I was like, "Oh, we've been doing it wrong this whole time. You just need to stab it in the throat
repeatedly."
with
Yeah,
a glass bottle."
Did we use like mech suits and all that? Like, no, you just stab that.
You just need to get close enough to really just jam it in there. So, anyways,
stab it with a bottle from Orbit.
Yeah, for those of you that really love the aliens like world, it is a very, very well done game. So there it is again, another Free League game I speak very highly of in 2020.
Dig it. That's very cool. I really, that's very impressive. I'll have to look more into that, even to get some ideas for some Esper Genesis adjustments that I might make. And yes, Coven, you were, of course, I apologize. Absolutely, you were part of that same event in the Warren, which was also awesome, as part of that same kind of experience. Sorry, no, I do that. But so, all right, Ness. Now, as Dot pointed out, we have run a little long, which is totally fine, because we were just having a great time.
It's just the two of us now.
It's just exactly so. But what I would like us to do is we will take just a couple of questions from chat if folks have any before we wrap up. So if you have a question about anything that's happened, if you're like, please talk more about X thing, or what do you think about Y thing, or, I'm interested in trying Z game. Now is the time to ask us. You can simply throw in question in all caps, and then let us know what your question is. Now is your chance to ask said question. We will take a couple of these, and then we will wrap up this episode of Masters of the Dungeon. So let us know, chat, if you have got any of those questions for us, and what it would be like if so, and what that would be involved. Yeah, the Coriolis thing. I don't know why I just had not at all heard of that. I don't know why.
Well, it's funny actually. Somebody from the Dot Lot is who suggested it to me. It's one of my Patreon supporters, and they're at a tier where we get to play games together privately, with their friends, and they suggested it, and I was like, I've never heard of this game, but I'll learn it if that's what you would like to do. And he sent it over. I was like, how have I missed this? How did I miss this?
Yeah.
This is the sci-fi game I've been looking for.
Where have you been all my life?
Where have you been all my life? Yeah, exactly. Like I said, for me, I really love, I really do love games that have a lot of rich history and lore, and a lot of it, some GMs hate the stuff that never comes to their players. Like I've probably read 400. It's a 400-page book. It is nothing to nod at. But I've probably read it cover to cover multiple times because I'm so into it. And really neat things like in the corner, they'll have a box that has like a story. And it'll be like, once upon a time, a man's son went on a journey and he failed to worship the traveler icon. And then it talks about like what happens, like all of these kind of mythos-based things. It's not hard rules or any story piece that you're going to use, but just enough to like add a rich layer to the aesthetic of the game.
Yep.
And I think that that's really one of the things that's inspired me a lot.
I love that stuff. The aesthetic makes a huge difference. It's sort of, again, a version of what I was talking about, Tales from the Loop. It's what I like about the Eberron stuff I've been reading. So, yeah. So Theater Nerd asks first, what do you find is important to remember or prepare for Session 0? I'm going to let Dot handle this to begin with because she just got done with this Session 0.
I did get done with a Session 0.
So what's important to remember or prepare in preparing for Session 0, Dot?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Remember to be patient. I have spent my entire holiday reading a Coriolis book. I have spent my entire holiday prepping for my Teens in Space campaign, which is basically going to be Xenon Girl of the 21st century. So I have this excitement. And remember that your players may come to the table and need help. And that takes patience because you're like, oh, well, if you just read the thing and it's like, well, everybody does things a little differently. But in addition, obviously you want to go over safety tools. We've talked a lot about that on this channel. In my opinion, we talk about safety tools, and I need to prepare my players. Session 1 is about preparing your players. A lot of GMs, and by all means, if this is how you run your session zeros, I don't. It's not about my story in session 0. It's about my players. It's making sure they're comfortable with their characters, that they understand how to build their character sheet, they understand how roles function and the game functions. And then if time allows, we can do some group storytelling that's not necessarily always for me. Like for my Teens in Space, as an example, they're being sent out on a mission for their final from Future Academia. They're all getting ready to graduate. They're on their final mission to be able to do such a thing. But they have traveled together once before. They've been assigned on a mission together once before in earlier years. And I just asked them, I was like, what was that mission? What did you guys do? Right. That is not going to come up at any other point, but it does give all of them a chance to share an idea, to have something to lean back on, and for me to watch their dynamic as a GM. So yeah, safety tools, expectation, right? I'm going to send you a Zoom link 30 minutes before X, Y, and Z. And then, I don't know. I think a session 0 is really important too, for you to tell them where you're coming from as a GM. Like what, the story that you prepared without giving things away, like what they can expect. I read an interesting little blog for my Patreon. It is open. This one's open to the public, where I talk about something new that I'm doing for every one of my campaigns. It's not a campaign primer. That is not what this is. It's called a GM note. At least that's what I'm calling it. And it's a letter that you write in the write to you from my perspective. And I'm basing it off of, if you've ever been to a theater play, there's always a director's note in your program.
Mm-hmm.
And that director's note doesn't give plot away. It doesn't tell you anything. It talks to you about where the director's coming from, about the aesthetic that they're going for, about what inspired them, what life thing made them want to tell this story, this thing. And so I show the example for my Coriolis campaign in that blog post. And I talk about, actually, one of the things that really inspired me about this is my fear of space. And my fear of that great void. Actually, Little Red Dot comes from an existential crisis that I had in college. There was some inebriation involved, but I had a friend who had one of those giant posters on their wall. I know you've all seen it, where it's got the Milky Way galaxy. It has a little dot and the arrow, and it says, "You are here." Mm-hmm. And I had this giant existential crisis breakdown over it. But out the other side of it, what I realized, it helped me put my position in the universe in place and these kinds of things. But it helped ground me a little bit and check my ego when I was a young 20-year-old. Yeah. And so Little Red Dot comes from the little red dot on the "We Are Here" poster of the Milky Way galaxy. And so I talk about that. Like I told them that story in my GM note, because it's important to the perspective I'm bringing from Coriolis. So I reiterate my GM note to them. I tell them why I'm excited to tell this story with this group of people. I don't usually do any kind of session proper in a session 0. I believe that's a session 1. You don't taint your roles before the story starts. So those are the things: safety tools, expectation, patience with character building, and your perspective as a GM, why you're excited to tell this story with this group of people.
Yeah, I think those are all good ones. I think what I would add to that is that in preparing for a session 0, one of the things that I'm trying to think of is what themes are being addressed within the world, because although I do think,
yes.
You obviously players are going to determine how they interpret those themes, but I do think that as the game master, what we bring forward are issues that we would like to explore and themes that are going to come up. And so whether it's, aspects of kind of darkness, fighting with demons, I think quite obviously Curse of Strahd, one of the major themes is dealing with demons, external and internal, and how does one do that, and how does one grow through the process of that struggle. And so what are the themes that you want to bring forward, and what are the sort of touchstones that you want people to imagine in that world? Because a lot of times they have a sense of what these things are, but in the case of Strahd, my Barovia, or my Esper Genesis, my Silrain Arc, or even my Middle Earth, is going to be somewhat different, although hopefully heavily shaded by, the worlds from which I'm taking them. They're going to be different from other people who are going to do the same things. And so what can you expect from my world? One of the things that we did in the session 0 for Adventures in Middle-earth was talking a lot about aspects of how important the journey is in this game as composed to what we get in D&D, where it often gets sort of hand-waved, how important the shadow is and corruption, how important the audience is. It has its own mechanic, like sort of dealing with people, and how important being able to overcome those things, is by working together. Those are elements that need to come forward, because a lot of the little nitty-gritty stuff you don't need to focus on, but you do need to be able to let people know you won't, mechanically, you won't be able to take a long rest in this game except at sanctuaries, ever. And the reason that's important is not just mechanically, but because it indicates how much exhaustion and like really fighting through the journey is important, and how you really will need to work together. So, so expectations and touchstones, influences become important. And then I will just echo exactly pretty much everything else that Dot said. In particular, I would echo the patience with character building and allowing the people to sort of find their own way. There is an art to that, because you have to, sometimes people are completely lost and they're just like, I like this place, but can I play fight person, or whatever. And they just have no idea. And it's not because they haven't thought about it. It's because they are overwhelmed by possibility. So in that situation, your job is to provide a safe, kind of broad outline within which they can then begin to imagine themselves and figure out who they are. And once you narrow that down, then you need to, as fast as possible, get out of the way as they begin to decide the kind of characters that they want to create. And it also depends on the level of experience. So with the players that I had playing, my Curse of Strahd campaign, they all came with like 6 million demons. Like, well, I got 2 ghosts inside me and I'm fighting the demon curse, blah, 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 and I've got this thing with it. And I mean, they all, and a lot of that stuff now is coming out and people are like, holy crap, revelation, idea, concept. And I'm like, yep, and I've known about that obviously for over a year since this game has been running. And it's been waiting for them to sort of develop it. But I knew about a lot of that in the session 0, even before that. Some of the stuff came out in the process of discussing things that we could do and the sort of struggles and obstacles that one could find in a world like this. So, really getting a chance to shape the broadest contours of the world, I think is helpful. I think it's a mistake to go into a session 0 and hold all of your cards on the table face down and be like, all of this would be a mystery, because there's going to be enough mystery as it is. If you don't give them some sense of, and you just saw it with Coriolis, that the way Dot explained it, so you get this sense that mythos is important, these icons are important, the Arabian Nights / meets Babylon 5 / meets Deep Space Nine, all of this is really helpful because it gives people a sense of what they're working with, and it means they're not going to waste time creating some Star Wars Indiana Jonesy type of thing, which is not going to fit with this, or making it all
or Han Solo, right?
Han Solo,
that's a very different vibe,
or making it into Spaceballs. As you said, like this is not intended to be comic. Like, not every game has to be comedy. So yeah, like understanding that I think is something which the session 0 stuff really, is helpful with.
And I dropped it there for all of you, that blog post I wrote. If you want to check it out and actually read the GM note, the literal GM note I gave to my players, it is there in that blog post. And you're welcome to check it out.
I love it. That's good stuff. And then the second question we got from Rock God, Arv, anything new coming to the channel this month, next week, maybe? I'm glad you brought that up, Rock God, because, there are things that happen on this channel on a regular basis, and happening next week. We are going to have, just a normal Wednesday. No, I'm just kidding. Next Wednesday, we will be debuting on this channel a new community D&D game, not involving me at all. It will be run by GM Shadowed Mage, one of my longtime mods on this channel, and it will star such notable regulars as Rock God, such notable regulars as Echo Alpha X5, such notable regulars as Rock God, who's also a mod, and it will also feature mod Kilobyte, and it will feature a streamer named Hoodie, who I'm not familiar with, but who is a apparently longtime, very experienced player. And they are going to be playing Dragon of Icespire Peak. So we've got that going on too. So that is happening as of Wednesday. It's going to be happening on Wednesday evenings. Thank you very much, Jane Dogs, for the host. I appreciate it. It's going to be there on Wednesday the 8th and Wednesday the 22nd, starting at, I believe, 7 p.m. Eastern. I have to double check. But it's going to be really cool. And I can't wait to see them playing it. Again, again, because it is more content that's awesome tabletop that I don't have to do anything with myself except just watch and enjoy it and promote it, of course, and talk about it.
Great,
so I'm,
right?
I'm very excited about that, and I want to do a lot more of that. Oh, I'm sorry, 9 p.m. Sorry, 9 p.m. Eastern. And so I am very excited for that because, again, I want my channel to become the source of more D&D things, as Dot has been talking about, building her channel with a lot more cool stuff from Renegade and many other, sources of games. I want to build mine into, doing even more of this kind of cool stuff that we're doing. Is Dragon of Icespire Peak part of a storyline? I do not want to answer that, Echo, because I want to leave that entirely up to Shadowed Mage. Again, his Dragon of Icespire Peak is not going to be what mine would be or what anyone else's would be. So I want to leave this up to him. And having played with Shadowed Mage on several occasions with me as the DM, I'm looking forward to seeing how he DMs himself, because he's done it for a long time, and I'm anxious to see how he kind of puts it all together. So it's going to be cool. I'm excited to see it. And so, yes, that is happening Wednesday, the 8th, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern. So you will want to check that out. If there are no other questions, then I think we are going to bring Masters of the Dungeon. I will remain doing other game stuff, but we're going to bring this to a close. And I do want to say again, Dot became the full-time co-host that is just currently the only other co-host with me at the moment. Although we will, I'm still looking to see if we can bring in a third person as well. But it is always a lot of fun to do these. I really am so happy that we've had a chance to do this, not only this, but also Strahd and also our vocalist Dot. It really is awesome. And I am looking forward to 2020 very much and all the stuff that we do with you. So
More to come, right?
More to come. So
everybody's like, so 2020, right? And I was like, yeah, just the same let's do more of the same stuff, because 2019 was great. I want more of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm really, when and if I want to run an Eberron campaign, may I be a part of it? Pretty pleased with cherry on top. We'll have to talk, Lone Wolf. I mean, maybe I will have to see how that all goes down. I mean, first crack, if I do play it with the Infinity and Beyond people, or the Infinity and Beyond people, because I adore them as players and I frankly would like to keep them together forever. So I'd have to chat with them first, but we will see how that all happens. So 2020 is clearly 2019, but even more so. And that's okay, sort of. Except if we could calm it way down on the climate change and also radically shift politics, that would be great. If we could do both of those,
bitchin'.
If we could just make that happen. Anyway, Dot, where will the lovely folks then see you next, most imminently, let us say?
Yeah, I may on Sunday. Well, let me just put this out there. VTM is back over on Roll For It tomorrow. We've had our holiday break and some serious business is going down. I cannot say anything, but if you need a little loss of humanity in your life, come hang out tomorrow, because it's going to be an intense kickoff to 2020 for VTM over on Roll For It.
Nice.
Sunday, actually, one of my Sunday shows has kind of dwindled away in 2020. And so I may be doing some GM planning on Sunday. So if you actually want to come watch me plan the rest of Coriolis and Teens in Space, I may be doing like a live GM plan, if you don't mind some spoilers. And then most importantly, next Thursday, I kick off the Coriolis campaign, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard on Unmade Gaming's channel. And the following week on Wednesday, I kick off Teens in Space. It's 2284, futuristical flash, baby. We're going to get a little 80s retro, a little techno.
I assume there's going to be a lot of chrome. Is there a lot of chrome involved?
So much chrome.
So much silver?
If you guys haven't seen, the final trailer's not out yet, but the teaser trailer is, and it's like super futuristical.
Nice, like Space 1999 version though, like like the planet on the sleeve and everything.
Yeah. It's literally Xenon Girl of the 21st Century is my inspiration for the aesthetic. So just like neon colors, horror. Yeah, exactly. Just like horrible, cheesy space stuff. But they'll be playing teams, so yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So I'll be doing some planning, but most importantly, those are kicking up here over the next few weeks. So you can always just check out my Twitter, where I'll be announcing those as they roll out.
Very exciting, and always a pleasure to have Dot with us. And of course, you will also see her here on Strahd, which will be coming up. I think we have
2 Saturdays.
2 Saturdays.
This Saturday is the following.
Right, exactly. Not this coming Saturday, but not tomorrow, but like the following.
But the following.
And then of course also for our vocalists, where at least for a session or two, and then I will see whether they're sick of it or whether they want to continue. But I think they'll be okay with it because they took a break last month, so we will do a month or two more of Apollo Justice Ace Attorney, which does involve everyone laughing more than is probably good for them. Like it's probably not. That is all comedy all the time. So you will get to see They're incredible talent as voice actors as well. But Dot, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. I enjoyed this immensely as always. And chat, can we get some love for Little Red Dot? And thank you to Theater Nerd again for the sub and for gifting a sub to Little Red Dot and for being awesome and don't be a stranger and all that kind of stuff. But thank you, Dot, so much. And I will speak to you soon.
Yeah, I'll see you at least in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Bye.
For now. Okay. Good stuff, folks. So that was awesome. I'm so happy that we're back in the saddle with Masters of the Dungeon, which, as I say, I love talking shop, basically. And whether it's talking writing shop or sometimes music shop or whether it's talking D&D shop, I am all about it. So I am happy to get a chance to do it with Dot, who's really cool person. And I really am glad that she's become a part of this channel as much. I mean, I was joking with her about that, just like, secretly involving her with things, but I didn't add her into anything extra. I haven't added Dot into anything more. I'm just saying, when you're done with this commitment, how about I just smoothly commit you to something else without you realizing that you're really doing it? Not that I am actually doing that, at all. Because I mean, that's not at all what I would want to do. I don't in any way want to suggest to anyone that there's certain things that would be of great interest to someone or indeed would be something they'd want to play more of. I mean, I don't know why anyone would think that there's that you would want to. I don't know what the thing. Anyway, but in all seriousness, thank you, Dot, so much, and it's going to be awesome. Now, we are going to close down Masters of the Dungeon. I want to thank everyone who watched this for now. I am not done, however. I am going to play for another hour and a half-ish of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, but I am going to stop this particular recording, and then I will be right back with return with some Jedi. I will, if you will, the return of the Jedi. So I'll be right back at you in just 1 second. For those of you watching Masters of the Dungeon, thank you so much. Check out the YouTube and the playlist for this, and I'll see you back here for that soon.